Welcome to our session on how behavioral science can be used to drive employee productivity and customer engagement. When I joined this industry, as leaders, we were taught about behavioral science and how we can help our teams. But we never thought we can get same or better results digitally. However, we have seen this trend changing in the last few years. We have seen how social media, how retail giants like Amazon use this effectively, and we want to use this in our day-to-day operations as well as for the solutions which we are creating and engage our customers. For today's discussion, let me welcome my elite panelist, Anant, who is one of the co-founders of Worxogo and our behavioral design expert. He has been closely working with EXL on implementing their solution AI Coach, which is part of Nerve Hub. Smriti Agarwal, who is a veteran at EXL and currently leads our delivery for transportation and logistic clients. And Gaurav, who heads portfolio of our AI-infused cloud-native solutions like Paymentor. Let me start with a few questions to Anant. Anant, can you give us a brief introduction on behavioral design?
Thanks, Sumit. Very happy to be here. Good afternoon, Smriti, Gaurav. So it's very fascinating, Sumit, when we started on this. But behavior design fundamentally talks about a systematic understanding of how people, all of us, you, me, Smriti, Gaurav, all of us, we think in our daily lives and make decisions. So it is a combination of design thinking, which is empathy for the user, figuring out what the individual feels, wants at a particular moment in time, and influence, the power of being able to influence a decision by giving the right kind of choices. So it's a fairly new emerging field. 2018, when Thaler and Sons team won the Nobel for Behavioral Economics, it's getting a lot more traction. But if I give you, you'd be surprised to hear from mid 2000s, it's been in the government to citizen realm very successfully. So the UK government started with the behavioral nudge unit, more than a decade ago. Did very well as far as getting the government to citizen in interactions going right. Things like saving electricity, organ donation and stuff like that. Barack Obama in 2008 set up a nudge unit. India as well, 2018 now has folks who are in the government with the Niti Aayog who are working on behavioral interventions for the rural economy. So it's been around for a while, but it's coming into the enterprise world reasonably, recently. And it's been a few years where forward-looking companies are using behavior design to improve productivity, both for their teams as well as offering better experiences to their customers. So the cornerstone or the basic premise is about how do you empathize with the individual at the end of a process. It could be a customer. So the product Paymentor that EXL has, which is about getting the customers to engage better with your clients and get the payment process working more effectively. It looks at you can look at behavior design around empathizing with the user to custom define a process or an experience which is a win-win for the organization as well as for the customer. For the business to employee perspective, which is AI Coach, it can be around how do you treat each employee in a process, how do you treat them uniquely based on their personal motivation as well as their performance context. So long answer, but fundamentally behavior design starts with the individual first. Whereas if you take behavior design out, it's always the process first or the product first. So it's a person, starting with the individual, looking outwards to say, how do you customize an experience which makes them want to engage with you more for a better outcome.
Okay. And can you elaborate a bit more on this nudge? Because nudge theory is something which is is inbuilt in the AI coach which we are using. So if you could elaborate a bit more on that.
Sure. So, and I'll just touch a little bit on that, the Nobel Prize winning research. So, which says that a nudge is not a it's not a recommendation. So there are a lot of notifications and stuff that we get in our personal lives. A nudge is essentially giving you a series of choices which leaves the autonomy with the individual. So what action should I take is left to me to decide, but the choices presented to me are the ones which kind of gently focus me in the direct me in the right direction. So it's not forcing me to do something, but it's gently orienting my worldview around saying, okay, these are the 2-3 things that I need to do. And I'll give you an example, Sumit. I'm sure since it's December, all of us will enjoy this one. New Year resolutions. All of us, 31st December, or at least I do, I can tell you for a fact, every year I decide this year I'm going to hit the gym and get that 6-pack. And it's been, I can confidently tell you, it's been 20 years I haven't been able to do that. So I'll take up a gym membership. I go for the first 15 days in January and then stop following through. So if you ask me, do I have the data to know what I need to do to be fit? Yes. Eat right, sleep well, exercise regularly. I have the data. Do I have the intent to improve? Definitely do. Right? So I want to do better. And I pay money to take a gym membership as well. Right? Do I follow through? No. And if you see how these fitness trackers have used this nudge concept very brilliantly, which is at the point of now that fitness tracker knows that I want to do something, right? So it's tracking my 10,000 steps or whatever. At specific times, it will send me a bite-sized piece of information, which kind of motivates me to take an action, which is walk, or take those steps. So what my intent to improve, the data I have to improve exists with me. I've not done for all these 20 years. I slap on a fitness tracker on my wrist, and I am being a little more consistent and a little more better every day on taking those steps, right? Similarly, what it does in the company to customer experience, right? It looks at how you can look to drive this. And when we talk about the AI coach first, it looks at figuring out what is the performance context of each one of your team members. So you can have a high performer, someone in the middle of the bell curve, and someone who's not doing so well. Now, if you show them all the same data, you can't expect them to have the same reaction. So a nudge to a high performer will be more about how do you make them to be more consistent at being high performing. And we get asked this question all the time, saying, it's a coach, the high performers don't need it. And our response always is, even Federer has a coach today, right? It's not because he needs to know how to hit a forehand or a backhand. It's about how to make those minor tweaks to keep him at that elevated level of, his game. Similarly, AI coach does that for employees. Similarly, if you're looking at the consumer, it's about how can you look at those specific behavior cohorts, which are not just looking at one dimension of how they interact. So in the payment example, there could be a person who's not able to pay right now, but the willingness might be there. So can you give that individual a series of choices which can be unique to their performance context, which is, I don't have the ability to pay the full thing, but I can pay a little lesser. Or if I get compared with somebody else who's in the same situation as me and gets nudged, it's called social norming, right? So you will compare with someone similar in my similar condition, say, hey, you know what? So many of those folks have done it. Can you also do it? So leaves the choice with me. It's not forcing me to do it, but gently orients my decision around that. So nudge is about looking at influencing the decisions that we all make as consumers, employees, or working in an organization. How do we orient ourselves to making those minor changes in our habits on a daily basis to be better? So it's not just data, Sumit. It's data exists everywhere. I have the data to be fitter, but I don't follow through on it. So a nudge is essentially just making sure it converts my intent into an action.
All right. Thanks, Anand. So let me go to Smriti now because Smriti has used AI Coach in her operations and how she found nudges to be helpful in her operation. So Smriti, over to you.
Thanks, Sumit, and good afternoon, everyone. So I think I would just agree to what Anant has said. And, when we first met, Anant, you and I, and we spoke about nudges and behavioral science, I went back and Googled and started reading about it, and I didn't believe in it. And I thought how difficult it is to make people go through their current MIS dashboards, reports, and make them understand that, there's a little scope of improvement for the bottom quartile or for even the ones who are in the medium range. You go back to their performance and stuff. Now we introduce them to this new tool. And will they understand? Will they go on to the tool themselves, look at the dashboards that are published, etc.? So I had my own doubts, but Sumit, to my amazement, what we've seen in the last about a year already, Anand, almost about a year now, and we were lucky that we implemented and got introduced to this at the beginning of the year, and now we can actually compare how it worked before we were working from home in an office environment, as opposed to how it works today in a remote environment as well. So, for us, it's like a single platform where we manage entire workforce real time. The data visualization, the dashboards, the reports that are kind of published today are user friendly. Everybody gets to see the data, and those nudges really help. And to his point, who would say that high performers don't need it? In our example, people who are at the top quartile or are the top performers would continuously want to go real time and otherwise look at where their performance is. Are they still at the top of the chart? What is it that they need to do and implement to remain there and further improve? And they will have their own targets. They'll have their own goals to, how do I beat what I had recorded as my top performance, etc. So it's constantly helped us in driving performance, positive reinforcement, as they call it, and it's important. It obviously will be different on how people take it. It could have a negative impact, could have a positive impact, but these reinforcements and how we've seen the AI coaches, led us to get productivity improvements in our operations has definitely helped. So we just continue to have more positive reinforcements through this, and the leadership can directly interact with the team, do the nudges, and just helps us create more connect with teams at all levels.
And Smriti, did you find that people were more comfortable getting feedback from or nudges, which may not be as, I would say, slightly on the negative feedback side from the AI coach as opposed to a team manager? Because to a team manager, you're always it's not a good factor to feel that you are being told that you're not doing well. But if a AI coach nudges you that you can do better and you are not doing well, it's still okay because it's the machine telling you. Did you see that happening on the floor?
Yes, Sumit, I would say, and it definitely makes a difference. If we had, and that is the reason why I said, it's so nice now, if you go back and look at in the past, we actually have data points to compare. So earlier, if a supervisor was giving feedback real time as well, the first question that a person would have is he even backed up by data? These are all biased feedback. He doesn't like me, he hates me. I've been trying to improve. Why is he coming back to me and saying you're not meeting your targets, etc.? And then now when we have data and he gets all of these, and it's mobile compatible, while on the way to the office, people actually check these dashboards on the mobile, in a cab or while commuting to work, and they know, they've seen the data. So by the time they know that they've received these notifications, it's validated, backed up by data. They'll have no reason to think that there is any biasness. There's no reason to say that, just because you're not liked or you are new in the system, there are issues, etc. So it's definitely helped, and people take it more positively because they don't want those constant nudges or the constant reminders or intra-day reminders as well, saying there's something lacking, you've missed on a particular hour or a particular interval. So they want to be consistent throughout the day, and they want to be consistent, in fact, even otherwise, to stay and build numbers. But yes, to your point, it definitely is more positive looking at dashboards and not just listening into a feedback. Feedback was more negative. This actually has been taking more positive attitude to work and improvement in the performance.
All right. Thanks, Priti. So let me go back.
Sumit?
Yeah.
Sumit, if I can also just add to what Smriti said, right? And I think it's a really powerful concept, because what happens once you use AI coaches, that then the data and the reality is already been told to the employee. The conversation then with the supervisor is much more about how do I really improve, versus if you looked at the past, 70% of the conversation was about a debate on data and reality and actual facts, right? Because there was question of how are you comparing me? Where is the data to compare me? You always compare me. Is it the right comparison? With AI coach, the employee actually knows where they stand vis-a-vis their targets, vis-a-vis peers, vis-a-vis benchmarks. The conversation then comes as, you as a manager, how can you help me become better? And I think that's a great shift, because then that's the real conversation which adds value to a business.
Yeah, agreed, Gaurav. So let me shift this conversation from the employees to customer and go back to Anand. So Anand, on the employee, it's easier to make the choice architecture, because there is a motivation, because employee wants to do well, they want to get better, get recognition in the company. But for the customer, and especially if we're going to talk about collections where it's not something a customer wants to do. So how do you influence a choice architecture for a customer who at the first place is not even willing to have that conversation, or is a nice thing to have with the customer?
So it's a great point, Sumit. I think it's interesting. I think it all comes down to what we were talking about earlier, which is if we approach the conversation from saying, rather than how do I collect from a customer versus how do I make a customer pay voluntarily. Okay. And interestingly, this is why I spoke about the UK government as an example, where they were trying to do electricity, reduction of electricity bills, the gas bills and all that they had. So they've used something in behavior science term called calibrative anchoring. Okay. So I'll come exactly to the question that you were asking. I don't want to pay. Okay. But if I get told there are X amount of similar people in your case who've chosen to pay, whatever the EMI or the payment installment that's there this week over the last 6 months or the last n number of months. What you're doing is, and this is part of and this conversation can be either through the product or in a conversation that you're having with the customer. You're anchoring the individual to say, okay, look, you are not alone in this situation. It's about you. It's not about the collection itself or the payment itself that you have to make, right? Majority of so many people have done this. We've seen where, in similar cases where you'd see an uptick in the person voluntarily doing a promise to pay, a PTP in industry parlance, which is now it's you're leaving the choice with me to choose, saying, okay, I am willing to do it. I don't have to do it. I know so many people are doing this, right? The other is what Gaurav spoke about earlier, right? It's about one version of reality between both sides of the conversation. So we were speaking about team leader and employee, but in this case, the organization and the customer. If you create a fear of missing out, again, this is one behavior principle where what you're telling the customer is, here is a visual representation of, if you don't take this action, this is what happens to you. Your credit score goes down or falls by X points or whatever it is, right? So you're now, and connected with calibrated anchoring, it will again leave the choice with the individual to choose, saying, okay, this is what I should probably do, instead of starting with a point saying, okay, I don't want to, how do I get out of this conversation, with whoever I'm speaking to right now. And there are other similar examples. There's another one with virtue signaling, where you, and this is that personalization and empathy that behavior design talks about, which is if you highlight to the customer what they have done in the past, what their relationship has been. So last 3 months, you've been consistent in your weekly or monthly payments, by 90%. You don't do this and you're going to lose out on being consistent. So it's about them now, and you're leaving the choice with them, right? So I think there are a lot of these behavioral hooks that can be used, both as part of the product as well as discussion with the customer, to ensure that they retain the autonomy of choice, but then they are motivated to. It's a win-win kind of a conversation, and we've seen a lot of direct improvement in your metrics around either its collection efficiency or it's around customer satisfaction with the organization go up, because now it's no longer a antagonistic relationship. You're jointly trying to arrive at a thing which works for both of you.
Okay.
Is that a question?
Yeah. Thanks, Anand. So let me come to you, Gaurav. Gaurav, your team is creating these new digital solutions which are going to impact directly the customer and specifically Pay Mentor. How do you think about behavioral science can really impact the outcomes, and what you think about it?
Yeah. No, sure. Thank you, Sumit, and thank you so much for having me. So I think Anand summarized it quite eloquently, right? So it's not good to go second. But I'll just also start by a quick personal point of view, right? So I always want to study further. So my master's that I have planned sometime in my 40s will actually be in behavioral design and psychology, because I just think the impact it can have on business and on outcomes, is just, phenomenal. So that's something that's on my to-do list. I hope it doesn't take me 20 years like Anand's gym assessment, but we'll not see. So just coming back to your question, Sumit, right? I think the very interesting part about behavioral design for us is that we obviously come from a heritage of analytics, cloud, AI, right? So those are our strong suits. But when we looked at, are they enough to drive the kind of business outcomes we want? Specifically, let's take the example of collections. We actually found that there was something missing. And that's where we talked to Anand and his team. And we have augmented our AI cloud technology capabilities with that of behavioral design. And the basic reason for that is that if you look at collections, there are two axes. There is ability to pay and there is willingness to pay. Ability to pay, we have a lot of analytics, models, risk ratings, bureau data to help us do that. The willingness to pay and how to drive it to high is something that we've always struggled with. And that's where I think behavioral design comes in. And Anand spoke about a few things, right? So there are motivators, there is the fear of missing out, there is virtue signaling. When you use all of this, what we have seen is that collections in the past has always been an adversarial conversation. But the use of this actually turns that adversarial conversation into a conversation about how we can help. And that's a big shift in actually getting customers to engage and then obviously solve for their problem. Because let's be very clear, right? Most of the customers do not want to be in debt. They do not want to get chased. They don't want to feel as though they have done something wrong, but they need help. And in that help, what we have seen and what Anand's team have shown us research on, a human-to-human conversation in most times doesn't help. I will be very unhappy, or it'll be a difficult conversation if I share with you, Sumit, that I have lost my job, or I am facing financial difficulties, or I have fallen on hard times. But that same conversation happening digitally, happening with motivators that look, you're not alone. There are so many other people who have also been in debt, who've also lost jobs, who've been in financial difficulty. But this is how they have come out of it. That's the real conversation I want to have, and I want to have it without anybody judging me. So the big point here is the AI coach doesn't judge me, right? And that's a big thing for a customer, because then that gives them, the customer, a comfort to engage with you. So I think that's been the big learning and the big benefit that we have seen. I would say the one other thing which has been really interesting and which is a great part is all the behavioral design elements that we are putting in are dynamic. And by that I mean is, when we say, look, this is how this is the motivators to give a customer, and that would include, for example, people like you have taken this payment plan, people like you have gotten out of their credit distress over a 15-month period by doing this. But all of that, when we try out those motivators, those strategies, we get feedback. And actually the behavioral design algorithms that Anand's team have built, they learn. So it's a constant feedback from customers that enables this to constantly evolve, which is another positive point about this. This is not static. This is not a strategy saying do this and it'll work for you for the next 2 years, 3 years. So the dynamic nature of what Anand's team have built is the other point which I think has been really powerful in actually helping us do a lot of test, learn, experiments, and get value from these in terms of customers paying back more. So that's what I would say has been our experience and our learning. I would say it's a little, we are still early on the journey. I think Anand would agree. There's a lot of scope for, this entire science and the strategies behind it to improve. And actually that's very exciting. And I think, we are really excited to be on that journey. I would say the marketing side of the world have really, so for example, if you go to an Amazon, you go to any e-commerce site today, they really track your behaviors. They give you motivators. They tell you other people like you have bought this, other people like you have done similar things. This is how much you save. Lots of interesting stuff is there on the marketing side. I think a lot of that, putting it onto the risk and the collections part of the world is what we're aiming to do.
All right. Thanks, Gaurav. So maybe I will do the reverse order this time for closing comments. So just in one line, if you want to say how you would imagine behavioral science will change the way you do your work, just one line to close it.
So you start with me now? I go first?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I just say that behavioral science will help me personalize a lot of what we do for our customers and basically reach the hallowed segment of one, goal.
All right. Thanks, Gaurav. Smriti?
So, Sumit, in one line, I would say the first is obviously nudging is inexpensive. It's coming, it's cheap, it's individual. And, we can continue to just influence human behavior by the observations and the observable phenomena. And that's how we'll kind of get the advantage.
Thanks, Smriti. Last, Anand.
So, Sumit, I think I cannot agree more with what Gaurav and Smriti have said. But if I were to summarize, I think for too long we have, human beings, individuals have been in the work environment as well as when in our interactions are assumed to be similar, and it cannot be further from the truth. We are all unique in our own ways. We are not machines or automatons. So behavior science, while it's an early body of science, is evolving. It is going to be the future in how forward-looking organizations, both for their customers and their employees, will be the layer which has been missing till now for the knowledge worker, and which will make a clear distinction between organizations that outperform and those who don't. So I think it's here to stay and here to make a big difference going forward.
All right. Thanks all. I fully agree with all the panelists, and I believe behavioral science can change the way enterprises today work, both with their employees and with their customers. So thank you all.